Okay, so we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to go ahead and show you how to create a offering inside of the service catalog. So from the top level, you can see that we're under catalog, where we have two categories: GitOps and sample category. Our sample category has one service definition that's in the operation phase, called sample business service. And if we select sample business service, not by clicking the drop down, but just by highlighting it, you can see that we have this offering section that shows up, and currently there's no offerings underneath it. Two types of offerings can be added. We can have an offering that's fulfilled entirely inside of the service management platform. Then we also have what we classify as aggregated offerings, which are intended for cloud provisioning, where it's going to be provisioned outside of the service management uh, application here. So we're going to go ahead and add an offering. So this is just a basic offering. I'm going to show you different things that you can do with these offerings in here. So here we're going to give it a display label. So here's a sample offering, and we're going to go with a description of sample offering for demonstration that contains, wow, I can't type today, numerous user option examples. Okay, so there's our description. Our service definition came from what we had previously selected of sample business service. What type of offering is this? Is this an IT offering, support offering? Is it an IT service offering, or an HR support offering? We're going to go with IT service offerings. One key differentiator here, we have two major types of offerings and requests inside of the service management automation platform here. We have a support offering, which indicates something is broken and you need support for it. But we also have service offerings, which is intended for, I'm asking for something new. I need a new keyboard. I would like a new mouse. I need some additional disk space added to a server. Um, things of that nature. So we're going to go ahead just with a service offering here. The status of the service offering, depending on um, what you're doing, you may have a need to use some of these other options, but for our purposes, we're just going to go ahead with active, so that way we can make sure that we get it out there. Scrolling down a little bit, we're going to promote on a normal basis. We're not going to fill in anything here that's not required, because we're going to take a look at that stuff um, ahead of time, and we're not going to have an SLA tied to this because we don't need one. It's not required to create the item itself. So we're going to go ahead and save and edit this thing. So an offering, once you get created and once you get to this point, has lots of different capabilities. You can use and tie into asset management. You can pull and reserve um, hardware from a stock room, for instance. You can build custom approval plans. You can build custom task plans for the fulfillment phase of the actual um, request that's going to get generated. So there's lots of different things you can do here. One of those things that you can do is request additional information from the user that's specific to this request, and we call those user options. So our user options, we're going to have you can, more advanced situations, you'll use sections and groups, but we're just going to go ahead and create a couple of fields. So we're going to create a new field. This is a new data point. We're going to ask the user to, well, gotta love all the enhancements. So when we go to add these user options, we have sections, groups, and fields. More advanced, situations and use cases, you can dig into sections and groups, but for our sake, we're just going to use fields. So we're going to go ahead and create a new field. Um, and we're not going to add this to any particular area, right? In this case, it could be added to a group or section if you had one, but if you don't define one, you can just click OK, and you get your new field created. So what is the name of this field? This is going to be sample field. We're going to call this sample string field medium. Um, and so we have a name for the field, but then we also have a display label. And this display label can be very customized on a per region basis. So you can see multi-language support here is enabled. I don't speak any of these other languages, so I'm going to go ahead and put in my English version, but this is just different locales that can be leveraged. So the end user, based upon where they're coming from, can get uh, the information in their native language, if you will. Of course, you're going to want some translation to occur there. Um, but we're just going to go with sample with the lowercase a, sample string field sized at medium. So this is just going to be a string field. So just going to be letters and numbers effectively together, plain text, if you will. Other types of fields that we have, though, we have lots of different fields we can have in here. And we'll take a look at some of those momentarily. Field size. For strings, you have medium and large. We're just going to go with medium because it's pretty straightforward. We're going to require this field. And let's see, from a visibility perspective, you can choose whether or not this field is visible to end users, so they have to populate it, or if it's visible only to agents on the backend fulfillment agents effectively. In our case, we're going to go with users. Help text if we wanted some. This is some sample help text if we wanted to. And again, this is multi-language as well. So if you wanted to populate from a different locale, you could. Okay, so there is one field. We're going to go ahead and create another new field. We're not going to put it in any grouping of any kind. So this is going to be a custom date field. Kind of making things up as we go. Custom date field. You can see the system barked at me a little bit there because I had spaces in my name. So that's the actual field name, and then the label that I'm going to give it can contain spaces. Custom date field, and its field type is going to be. We're going to pick date, and medium is fine. We're also going to be a make it required, and we're going to say select the date as our help text. Okay, let's create another new field here. Okay, and what type of field do we want this one to be? This one we're going to make a rich text field. So we're going to call this rich text custom, and this is a custom example for rich text input. Okay, so it's going to be rich text. Look at this one. We're going to make large because a lot of times rich text would be like a copy paste of an email with formatting and things of that nature. And it's also, we're not going to require this one. Input additional data here as needed, for instance, as our help text. Okay, so now we have 3 fields here. So we're going to go ahead and click save. On this, making sure that all of them come into play. If we would have had groups or sections, you could start to apply logic to these fields such that, maybe you only need to require the custom date field if, maybe you only need to require the rich text field if it's after a certain date, for instance. You could do that sort of logic in leveraging groups and sections. Okay, let's keep kind of going down, creating our offering here. So, we're going to make our pricing. It's going to be visible to the self-service portal. Our basic pricing currency is going to be US dollars, and price of $14.99, for instance. Some of our items can have recurring prices. This particular one can. So we're going to set a recurring price of $4.99, and that will be a month. So total price out the door should be $14.99 for the item plus $4.99 a month for a monthly service charge, if you will. So a lot of organizations use that to forecast out and showcase to users who are making these requests that there is actual dollars that get spent on these things. Go ahead and save our pricing. Just as a quick note, one of the best practices as you go through these options when you're creating these things is just save when you're done with each tab. Just that way, if you do get an error somewhere along the way, because you could in a task plan, there's some advanced things there, or in rules, you could potentially lose some of your work there. Business rules we're going to gloss over for now, but effectively you can create business logic just like you can from a workflow perspective, but you can create it here that's specific to this particular offering. So that's one of the ways that you could control which fields are required when certain data is inputted. Task plans. We're going to take a look at task plans, and we're going to do some some kind of interesting things here. We're not going to put an approval on this particular one, so we're going to go to the Fulfill tab, and so this will be part of the fulfillment task plan, right? So these tasks will have to be completed prior to this request being fully delivered to the customer effectively. So the task plan design mechanism here is pretty straightforward. We have this little pencil. We can click that little pencil and we can add a couple of different things. We can add manual tasks, automated tasks, decisions, and joins. We're going to go ahead and add a manual task here. And this manual task will be just, new manual task number one, just for the sake of speediness here. We're also going to set that as the description. If we wanted to assign it to a group, we could. Let's do that. Let's assign it to the change manager group. I like picking on those folks. If we wanted some schedule associated with it or some external interaction, we could do that as well. Some of these things are pre-built out with the expectation that there'll be integrations coming and going. And you can see there's some other fields here on the task that we could set as well, but for our sake, we're just going to leave it relatively simple and straightforward. Okay, so now we have a new manual task. Well, maybe at the same time, we also want a new automated task. And let's see what this automated task is going to do. Add comment to the request, for instance. There's a number of automated actions that can occur, and we see those underneath the business rules section down here. So I'm going to click the set rule button. So things that we can do automatically in the system, right? We can add comments. We can add comments on related records. You can see the myriad of operations: create CIs, create purchase orders, create additional records if you wanted to spawn additional records off this request, create and delete relationships, reserve an asset, send a notification, set fields, etc. And you can see, the myriad of different things that you can do there. Other things you can do from an integration perspective, you can integrate and generate a REST web service request. You could use the orchestration mechanism, operations orchestration, to do so. You can send a chat ops notification if you want to do that as well. And then the bottom just gives us the preview. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a comment just as a simple automated action here. So what comment do we want to add? We're going to add, automated task to add a comment to this request has finished. We're just going to say has executed. That sounds better. Okay. And who are we going to make that comment as? We're going to make it as the system, or are we going to make it as the user who initiates and moves the request into the fulfillment phase? We're just going to go ahead and leave this as a system, so that way it's a system level comment with an optional visibility. We're going to make it a public comment, so that way we could see it also from the employee self-service portal side, as well as the backend agent interface, and a purpose. If we had a purpose for this, you can see these are just comment purposes, and we're just going to select provide information there. So we should see a comment that says something along the lines of automated task. What did I say? Automated task to add a comment to the request has been executed. It's going to be logged as system with public visibility with the classification for providing information. We're going to click OK. Now, let's add a additional task here. We're going to go ahead underneath manual task 1 and add another manual task. This one will be manual task 2. Go ahead and set that as the description. And we're just going to go ahead and click OK. Now, you can see that there is, a flow of operation here. From the start, we're both going to kick off manual task 1 as well as adding a comment to the request that would be automated, so that adding a comment would happen immediately, but manual task 1 could be delayed a little bit. If we draw a line, join, and we can start to manipulate the direction here. Let's see, this path to here, and this one we're going to delete that one actually, because we want to create a path to here. Oops, what did I do wrong? Path to here. Okay, so now manual task 2 won't be initiated until manual task 1 and the automated action has completed. So we can see that we can start to build the dependencies. And you can see as you get further down the line here, you can get joins, you can get decisions. So you can start to apply logic to the values that were selected, whether it was from the user or from the agent when they're fulfilling the request. And you can do all sorts of complicated actions as you go through these fulfillment plans. You can do the same sorts of things for approval plans and then also for review plans as well on service offerings. Okay, so we're done with uh, service offerings. Okay, went ahead and saved successfully because again, task plans could, if you do something, and have a orphaned task or whatever, it might balk at you a little bit there. Default values are exactly what they sound like. We're going to set some default values on the actual request. One of the things we're going to do on this particular request is set a default assignment group of change manager. Um, and we're going to set a default value for this user option that says enter additional information here, just to showcase that we can do that. And that will be text that now shows up in the item in and of itself. Go ahead, click save. Discussions and history tabs, they just keep track. This is like comments on this particular catalog offering itself, and then history just keeps track of all the detailed changes that have been made to the actual service offering itself. Okay, so with that, we have a service offering. It is associated to a service definition. So let's go see if this shows up in our catalog. So back to the service portal. I'm just going to go ahead and click the refresh button because I always like to do that, especially when manipulating the catalog, adding new items and whatnot. So that loaded up, sample category. Going to look at this, see what comes up. There's our sample offering right there. We can see that our cost came through. That's a good sign. Our sample business service is the service definition that we chose. You can see that in the parentheses there. Sample offering for demonstration that contains numerous user option examples. Great. I'm going to go ahead and click the request service so I can look at this service offering and see what it looks like. Okay, so here's our sample offering. We did not set an image. If we set an icon or an image, it would show up there. There's our sample description. Here's our business justification. We can see that it was indicated with a red star, so we're going to go ahead and, sample request to test the offering. What is our preferred method of contact? This is a standard question. These top two, scrolled a little too far. These top two items, the business justification and the preferred method of contact, those are asked on every single request. There's no getting around that. It's just the way that the system operates, because we always want to capture business justification for every type of request. And then we also want to capture what is the best way to contact the requester for this particular item. Is email or phone, the better choice there. Obviously, in a fully deployed system, somebody would review this particular field, see if we wanted to add some additional options. Maybe, SMS might be an option for communication. And that could be added to the list with relative ease. Here's our first example field. We can see that it's required by the red star, and the help text that we entered that said this is some sample text. So I'm just going to say entering a request. Okay, so now our next field is a date field. Okay, I'm just going to pick an arbitrary date in the future. And my custom example for rich text input. So this is going to be a bulleted list of items, for instance. Okay, if I highlight that, I then have these buttons here. So you can start to add some formatting to your particular text if you wanted to. This comes in handy a lot of times when you're copying and pasting of email, items, or copying things out of documents or what have you. You can insert tables and you can insert images and links and all sorts of fancy spear if you really wanted to get into it. But just showcasing a little bit of that. We have no attachment. We can see that our item is going to cost us $15 plus $4.99 a month. So that's great. A couple other things on offerings before I click the submit button. If we wanted to leave feedback, we could add feedback that could be visible to other users. This request was fulfilled in 3 days. Great service from this team. How whatever feedback you wanted to provide that could be useful to other users. Um, that's an option there. A lot of times there is the ability to upvote, so you can recommend this particular offering. Right? So in large catalogs, that can be very useful for folks to find, recommended offerings. Um, we have add to cart functionality. So think Amazon.com. You want to add it to your cart and go back and order a different item. You can then subsequently order multiple items all at the same time in the same request. Um, Sometimes that's useful depending on how the approval processes are set up. That can be beneficial to reduce the number of approvals that get generated. In our case, though, I'm just going to go ahead and click the submit button. And there you go. Our request was successfully created. We can click on that blue text there that says request number 11888, and we can see that, here's our request. From the employee self-service perspective, we can see the full details of the request, everything that got put in. And that wraps up the employee self-service side. Just real quick, let's go take a look at the actual request inside of the agent interface. So I'm going to jump over to the technician interface, the agent interface. I'm going to go to my mega menu. I'm going to go to service request. Now, in this case, the system was empty. This is the first request that was entered into the system ever. So there's only one record here. If we wanted to, though, we could leverage the advanced find button, the global search button up there, and put in our ticket number, which was 11888, and click search. And after a few minutes, it's going to index and it'll show up. So it won't show up immediately. It'll show up here within a few minutes, though. I guess I thought that was immediate. Okay, but here's our request. Let's go ahead and close this out. So we're back to this view. So we have our request. We have a quick edit system over here. These fields can all be changed, but if we wanted to set them, we could by clicking the edit button here. If we wanted to drill into the request, we click the request ID and start to get deep into the request management module in and of itself. But we can see that everything comes through. The key thing I wanted to showcase was on the catalog offering itself. In this section, you can see the values that we typed in, right? So those custom fields that we collected from the user when they inputted the request are now displayed to the backend technician so that they could leverage that information while they're fulfilling that particular request. Another thing to mention here is if I go to the task plan, we can see that we have a manual task sitting out here waiting to be executed. And we had an automated task complete. So I would expect a comment to have been added in the discussions tab about this particular record. Yes, and there's our comment that we added. It got entered. It was a public comment. So our automated task to add a comment to this request was executed. Happened 2 minutes ago. That's great. That shows us that the automation mechanism in the background is functioning properly. All good there. Nothing else I particularly wanted to show at this point on the request itself, but just notate that this was a public request. So we're going to jump back out and look and see what that looks like from the end user perspective. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this so I can get fresh comments. Depending on how things are set up in a production environment, it could have been a notification that got emailed out to a user. All sorts of ways to tell people that these things happen, but clearly we can see that that request or that comment that the system added is public. It's out here for the end user to see here in the record. With that, that wraps up our sample offering being created.